and welcome back to Delicious Science. I'm Dr. Joanna McMillan, nutrition scientist, dietitian, and someone who thinks about strength a lot. Now, I don't mean the gym mirror kind, the kind that means that you can carry your own groceries when you're aged 80, the kind that means that you can get back up after a fall, the kind that means that you keep living on your own terms for as long as possible. Today's episode is inspired by a story that literally did stop me in my tracks when I read it. Dr. Coralie Wales is an experienced health leader. She has an OAM for her service to community health, and she recently launched a new health promotion charity called Strong Australia, and it has the goal of making muscle strength a national health priority. That has been my motivation for the podcast episode today. The reason she did it isn't a statistic or a research paper, it was her mother. And my mum is also in her 80s, so another reason that it resonated. Her mother, Bonnie Jean, is a prolific artist and a fiercely independent woman, but she gradually lost the strength to do the things that defined her. It didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, almost invisibly. And Dr. Wales told the story of the day that her mother said that she no longer had the strength to get in and out of bed, so she decided to sleep in her chair instead. Like so many of us watching a parent age, she assumed that this was just what getting older looked like. And she now believes that it doesn't have to be that way. That is exactly what I want to talk about today, because there's a mountain of evidence showing that strength loss, the kind that leads to frailty, to falls, to loss of independence, is not an inevitable part of aging. It is largely preventable. And what we eat is a big part of the story. If you haven't listened to my earlier episode on muscle, in that one I do go deep on protein, supplements, and the basics of sarcopenia. That's the loss of muscle mass that we experience after about age 30. It's quite frightening, but it can escalate into your 50s, 60s, and beyond. So go back and have a listen to that full episode as a nice component to add to this one. So today I'm trying not to repeat everything that I said in the last one. I want to go a little bit further. I want to go into the gut-muscle connection. You've heard of the gut-brain, right? Well, there is also a gut-muscle connection. I want to talk about the role of your whole dietary pattern, the brain strength link, and why this conversation matters at a population level and not just at an individual one. So let's get into it. The scale of the problem. I want to start with a few numbers because I think they genuinely haven't landed in the public consciousness the way that they should have. Frailty affects more than 1 in 5 older adults globally. Not muscle soreness, not just feeling a little bit stiff, clinical frailty. That's a state of reduced physical reserve where vulnerability to health shocks accelerates and independence shrinks. In Australia, around 73% of adults do not meet the national recommendation of muscle strengthening activities. That's at least 2 days a week. 73%. That's nearly 3/4 of us. And that recommendation's not high. We're talking 2 sessions a week. It's the bare minimum. Australia spends an estimated $270 billion on healthcare each year, and about 2% of that goes to public health activities. The proportion specifically directed at preventing frailty is a tiny slice of that 2%, so less than $1 billion. Against an estimated annual economic burden from frailty in Australians over the age of 65 of approximately $10 billion. So we are dramatically underinvesting in something that we have the tools to largely prevent. And it's not just the economics. Listen to another story from the Strong Australia launch. Fiona Hodson is a senior pain management clinician. Her mother, Anne, lived with osteoporosis, arthritis, and other chronic conditions. And despite all of that, she spent years making quilts for hospitals and charities. She was connected. She was purposeful. And then gradually, she couldn't quilt anymore. She couldn't cook, she couldn't drive, and she lost her independence. Fiona says her mother always used to say, getting old sucks. Now I can relate. My mum says something similar. She's always telling me, Joanna, don't get old, as she complains about her aches and pains. I always remind her, well, Mum, what's the alternative here? But I get it. Fiona's mother hated having to rely on other people, and she was left wondering how different things might have been had her mother had the support to build and maintain her strength earlier, before frailty took hold. This is the conversation that Strong Australia wants to open, and I love it. It's the conversation I want to support. Why strength is about more than muscle. When most people think about strength, they're thinking about appearance, so toned arms, a six-pack, athletic performance, performance in the gym. And because that framing is so dominant, strength training can feel like it's for other people, for younger people, for gym people, for those people who care about how they look, all those buff folks in the gym. But I want to completely reframe that. Strength is the currency of independence. It's the physical capacity to keep doing the things that matter most. For you, that might be walking the dog, playing with grandchildren, carrying your own shopping, getting up off the floor, really good test to do, living in your own home, having your independence. It's not a vanity metric, it's a functional one. And the science has dramatically expanded in the last decade in terms of what muscle and strength actually do beyond movement. First up is metabolic health. Skeletal muscle is the body's largest site of glucose disposal. In other words, it's the major site of glucose uptake from the blood. So when you eat foods containing carbohydrates, muscle is where most of that glucose goes to be stored as well as used. Your liver is also a major store of glucose. More muscle, in simple terms, means better blood sugar control, lower insulin resistance, significantly reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, and when muscle mass declines, metabolic health usually follows. Second up, cardiovascular health. Greater muscle strength is consistently associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease and premature death across multiple large population studies. And that relationship holds even after accounting for aerobic fitness. So strength is independently protective. Third, we have bone health. Muscle and bone are deeply connected. Every time a muscle contracts against resistance, it places mechanical load on the bone it's attached to. That load stimulates bone remodeling and it keeps bone density up. And that's why weight-bearing exercise protects against osteoporosis in a way that things like swimming and cycling simply cannot, because there's no load on the bone. Fourth, we've got brain health, and this is the one that I think will surprise most people. Higher muscle strength is associated with healthier brain aging and a lower risk of dementia. This is not a weak association. It's been replicated across multiple large cohort studies. The mechanisms are multiple. Resistance training increases something called BDNF. That's a growth factor that supports neuron survival and neuroplasticity. It reduces neuroinflammation. It improves cerebral blood flow. And because greater physical capacity generally means more mobility and more engagement with life, there are secondary effects on cognitive stimulation and social connection too. That brings us to falls and frailty prevention. And this one is perhaps the most direct. Stronger muscles improve balance, reaction time, and physical function. And falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in older Australians. Preventing falls is not just about safety, it's about maintaining the confidence to keep moving, because one fall, or even the fear of a fall, can trigger a cascade of reduced activity that accelerates decline. So remember that strength is not really a fitness goal, it is a health outcome. Nutrition and strength, what you may not know. I covered protein and supplements for muscle in that earlier episode, so all the details are there that you'll need on protein targets, on leucine, creatine, vitamin D, and the omega-3s. So go back and have a listen to that one. And today, I want to go on beyond those basics and talk about the parts of the nutrition strength story that tend to get much less attention. First, you cannot build or maintain muscle in a significant caloric deficit. I'm going to say that again. You cannot build or maintain muscle in a significant caloric deficit. This may sound obvious, but it is largely ignored and it has enormous practical implications, particularly for women, because we are a culture that has trained women to eat less chronically. Many of the women that I speak with have spent decades on and off calorie restriction. They're always trying to eat less, and the cumulative effect on muscle mass is real. You need adequate energy to support muscle protein synthesis. When energy is too low, the body will preferentially break down muscle for fuel, regardless of how much protein you're eating. So it's not enough to just think, I'm meeting my protein needs and that's all I have to do. You've got to think about what your total energy intake is. This is one of my concerns about the rise of GLP-1 medications in people who don't need them for metabolic reasons. And I talked about this in one of our recent episodes on that topic. When appetite is dramatically suppressed in someone who is already fairly lean, what gets lost isn't excess fat, it's muscle. And for midlife women who are already facing accelerated muscle loss due to that declining estrogen, that is moving us in exactly the wrong direction. Eating enough is not a guilty pleasure. For muscle health, it's a physiological requirement. Second, the anti-inflammatory dietary pattern matters as much as protein. One of the drivers of age-related muscle loss that doesn't get enough attention is chronic low-grade inflammation. Researchers sometimes call it inflammaging. This is the persistent low-level inflammatory state that accelerates muscle protein breakdown. It impairs muscle repair, and it contributes to declining function. So you can be eating adequate protein and doing your resistance training and still be fighting an uphill battle if your diet is highly pro-inflammatory. So what does an anti-inflammatory diet look like in practice? Well, it's not complicated. It's the dietary pattern that the evidence has supported for decades. Plenty of plants, extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish, legumes, whole grains, minimal ultra-processed foods, and modest amounts of quality animal foods. Limited added sugar and refined carbohydrates. And look, this is essentially a Mediterranean-style dietary pattern, but we do have other dietary patterns, traditional dietary patterns from around the world. And the evidence linking it to lower inflammatory markers, better physical function, and slower muscle decline in older adults is both strong and consistent. Third, plant compounds, polyphenols specifically, they have been underappreciated for their role in muscle health. Polyphenols are the bioactive compounds in fruits, vegetables, tea, coffee, extra virgin olive oil, cocoa and dark chocolate, berries, herbs, and spices. We often talk about them in the context of heart health or gut health, but there is a growing body of evidence showing that polyphenols support muscle health too. The mechanisms include their anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects, reducing the oxidative stress and inflammation that accumulates in muscle after exercise and with aging. Some specific polyphenols, including the anthocyanins in berries and cherries, quercetin found in onions and apples, and the oleocanthal you'll get in your extra virgin olive oil, well, they've been shown in controlled studies to reduce muscle soreness, improve recovery, and in some older adult trials, support muscle function. Now, this doesn't mean that a handful of blueberries replaces protein or resistance training, but it does reinforce something that I always come back to. There is no single nutrient that does the work. It's the whole food pattern, diverse, plant-rich, minimally processed, that supports the whole body, including muscle. Fourth, the gut-muscle axis. This is genuinely emerging science, and I want to be careful about how I frame it, but it's too interesting not to mention. We know the gut microbiome influences inflammation throughout the body. We know that it shapes immune function, metabolic health, brain signaling. And in recent years, a picture has been building of a gut-muscle axis, a bidirectional communication system between the gut and skeletal muscle that influences muscle mass, physical function, and strength. What the research shows so far is that the gut microbiome diversity and composition correlates with muscle mass and physical performance in older adults. Specific bacterial species, particularly the butyrate producers, are associated with better muscle function. And animal studies show that transplanting the gut microbiota from young animals into older adults can partially restore muscle mass. And butyrate, that's the short-chain fatty acid produced when gut bacteria ferment some dietary fibers, well, it appears to directly support skeletal muscle energy metabolism and may reduce the muscle protein breakdown associated with aging. Now, this is still an emerging field. We don't yet have human trials showing specifically that improving gut health directly improves muscle health in older adults. But the mechanistic picture is coherent and compelling, and it gives us yet another reason why fiber and the diverse plant foods that feed our gut bacteria is not just a gut health story. It may be a muscle health story too. Practically, the dietary pattern that best supports your gut microbiome, high plant diversity, lots of fiber, fermented foods, minimal ultra-processed foods. That's the same pattern that supports your anti-inflammatory status, your polyphenol intake, and your overall metabolic health. It all converges. What to actually do? So let me bring this together into something practical. Move with load twice a week minimum. This is the non-negotiable. Food can't build muscle without the stimulus from resistance training. So gym, body weight, resistance bands, heavy gardening, carrying. What matters is that your muscles are working against meaningful resistance. The national guideline is at least 2 sessions per week targeting all major muscle groups. Currently, 73% of Australians don't meet that. So if you are in that 73%, this is your most important change. And I want to say it clearly, it is never too late to start. Studies have shown meaningful gains in muscle mass and strength in adults in their 70s, in their 80s, and even in their 90s from resistance training. The body retains this capacity, but the earlier you build the habit, the more you have it in reserve as you age. And obviously the load is going to change depending on the break that you've had from resistance training, or maybe you've never even really done it. And of course, the age and the strength that you have. So a little word of warning, I'm in my 50s. I went back to Body Pump relatively recently, and those first couple of classes absolutely killed me. And it was a great reminder, not a good thing that I'd taken a break from it, but it was a really good reminder as to how it feels when you overdo things. So bear that in mind. If you've not been doing strength training, make sure that you start slowly. Be easy on yourself. Get yourself back into it slowly, and you'll find that that strength builds quite quickly. The use of a personal trainer here or going to a group exercise class can be absolutely invaluable to make sure that you're in the right hands. And if you have any particular chronic diseases, injuries, or other medical concerns that may impact and affect the types of exercise that you're doing, it's a brilliant idea to get your GP to refer you to a proper exercise physiologist and one who specializes in whatever your particular concern is. There are specialist strength training studios in various parts of Australia that you can make sure that you're in the absolute best professional hands. Then, eat protein at every meal, spread across the day. The full detail here is in the muscle episode, but here's the short version. Protein triggers muscle protein synthesis only when it reaches a threshold concentration, roughly somewhere between 25 and 40 grams, quality protein per meal, depending on the protein source and your age. Older adults need more. Eating a large amount of protein in one meal doesn't compensate for low intake, though, for the rest of the day. You want to spread it, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, each with a quality protein source. Prioritize food quality, not just macros. Protein targets matter, but so does the rest of what's on your plate. Aim for a diverse, plant-rich dietary pattern built around whole foods. Plenty of vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, quality fats like extra virgin olive oil, and a regular intake of oily fish. This is the pattern that reduces inflammation, supports your gut microbiome and its butyrate production, delivers polyphenols, and provides the full nutritional context that your muscles need to stay strong. Eat enough, particularly if you're a woman who has spent years chronically restricting, particularly if you're using appetite-suppressing medications. Adequate energy is a physiological prerequisite for maintaining muscle. This is not a social permission, it's biological fact. Get your vitamin D checked. Vitamin D deficiency is surprisingly common in Australia, despite the sun. It impairs muscle function directly. Vitamin D receptors are present in muscle tissue and compounds with bone density loss. A simple blood test will tell you where you sit, and many people will need supplementation. The bigger picture. I want to close with the policy moment because I think it matters. Muscle strengthening exercise is not specifically prioritised in the Australian preventive health strategy. Despite the evidence, despite the fact that frailty costs billions, and despite the fact that the interventions, resistance training, adequate good quality protein, a whole food dietary pattern, are among the most effective, lowest risk, and most cost-effective health interventions that we have. Strong Australia is trying to change that. They're calling on the government to make strength a genuine national health priority, not a footnote in fitness guidelines, but a recognised pillar of preventive health. On a personal level, think about the person you love who's getting older. Think about yourself 2 or 3 decades from now. Think about what you want to still be able to do. Strength is not guaranteed, but it is to a meaningful degree within our influence through the food we eat, the way we move, and the choices that we make today. We spend a lot of time talking about living longer, and we should be talking equally about living stronger. A huge thank you for listening to Delicious Science. If today's episode gave you something useful or made you think of someone who needs to hear it, please share. And if you haven't yet listened to my earlier episode on muscle health, it's the perfect companion to today's. For more on National Strength Day and Strong Australia, you can visit nationalstrengthday.org.au. I'm Dr. Joanne McMillan. Stay strong, eat well, and I will see you in the next episode.